Yesterday we were discussing happiness, and that we are spiritual only when we understand we all do, but when we are convinced that happiness is internal, it lies within us. So let's continue in the same trend and find out how our interactions with the world can make us happier. Let's take sense contact. As we saw yesterday, you are happy in a sense enjoyment, in a contact with the sense object, only when you are the master. If you succumb to, cave in to the sense object and hand over the mastery to the sense object, two things happen. Number one, you cease to enjoy it. And number two, you get victimized by it. And in that victimization, you lose your mental peace of mind, you lose your physical well-being, you lose everything. Perhaps you lose your life. And so, one of the most, in fact, in the second chapter, when he speaks of a person of perfection, sthita prajna portion, continuously he harps on sense control as the starting point of the spiritual journey. So let's take a brief look at what this sense control is. The first step to sense control is when you entertain a value that is different from sense indulgence. Let's say, for instance, there's a person who loves good food and tends to indulge in food. The moment, and as a result of this indulgence, is nice and overweight. The moment the person entertains the value for looking good, it is still a selfish value. It is still, it's not a higher ideal. But that is enough for the person to control the contact with food and ends up enjoying whatever food he or she eats. And at the same time, if he gets pride in the fact that he or she has lost weight and is looking good. So what is it that helps the person in controlling that sense contact? Intellect. Why is it that we are unable to control sense contact? Because our intellect is not strong enough. We have not invested our energies, our efforts in developing the intellect. Intellect is something you're born with, but the strength of the intellect is something you need to develop. And the intellect is developed exactly as you develop your muscles. How do you develop physically? Exercise. The same way you need to exercise your intellect, but unfortunately thinking is something that has become a rare commodity. You follow what others dictate. You follow, one person in the world thinks and everybody follows. This herd instinct, the herd mentality is what is operating. Stand up and think for yourself. After all, it's your life. You should be in command of your life, not somebody else. So don't succumb to peer pressure. Don't succumb to a person who has a stronger intellect. And the next step is you move to a higher value. The higher value is not just to look good, but maybe you develop the value to work for an ideal, a higher ideal. So let's say you pick up a sport, your inherent talent, your swadharma. It could be music, it could be sport, it could be business, it could be anything. And the moment you're focused on that ideal, automatically sense control comes into being because you have a value, you are interested, you have a desire for something higher. So to that extent, you're not feeding the lower desires, and therefore the temptation itself fades away. So no longer are you captivated, enthralled by the lower values, lower desires. So this is the next step. In fact, sense control is this. When you move to a higher value, the lower desire no longer comes and interferes with you, and this is, so in other words, it is no longer sense control. You've just moved away, moved up the ladder, value chain, as it were. The next step, the highest step, is where you move your attention, your focus, from worldly goals, however high they may be, to God. And you understand that a divine force, a power beyond us all, has gifted each one of us with a certain talent, with a certain gift, and has blessed us with so many things. And therefore, whatever you do, if you're gifted with music, in the field of music, if you're gifted in accountancy, in that, if you're gifted in sport, in that field, you're so focused on contributing. So everything you do it for the sake of God. Then there is absolute, total, complete sense control. That's a wonderful state to be in. So any which way, starting with wanting to look good, to be healthy, to fixing a higher ideal, or whether you're doing it for God, all of this, the intellect and your conscience helps you in controlling your contact with the senses. And once you control the contact with the senses, once you gain mastery over them, then there is no taboo. You can do what you like. You can enjoy to any extent possible that you want to. No limits whatsoever. So sense control is not measured contact. Sense control is not going to a movie once a week. You can watch a movie every day. You can watch 3 movies a day if you like. But you must be the master of that contact. Next, action. So what gives happiness in action is when you act in a spirit of giving, with an attitude of giving, then you're happy. As long as you're working, acting in a spirit of grabbing, in a spirit of aggrandizing, it is impossible for you to be happy. And now you look at all of us, all over the world, everyone is looking at taking, grabbing, aggrandizing. How can anyone be happy under these circumstances? As we said yesterday and day before, Vedanta, the Gita, is an experimental science. Try it out. All these years, all your life, you function with an attitude of taking. And you have experienced whatever it is that you're experiencing. Change. Just for trying it out. Function with the attitude of giving. Attitude. You don't have to give anything. You don't have the capacity to give anything. Just shift the attitude. Whoever you meet, whatever, we are so used to planning and programming and maneuvering and manipulating and negotiating and shifting things around in the world only to suit me, that we don't even understand what it is to give. But at least sometime in your life you must have functioned with this attitude of giving. Go back to that experience and find out what it's like. This is very, very obvious with children, because children haven't learned the art of faking things, which we have. And you look at 2 children playing, and the child who grabs, who wants things to himself, he says, no, this is all mine. What is not his also he grabs as his. And watch the expression on his face. He's got a frown on his face, he's agitated, he's disturbed, he's not happy. Watch another child. There are some children who go out of their way to give things. The child may have 1 chocolate, but it will go out of its way to a friend who's sitting at the other end of the room and say, here, this is for you. And the child is beaming, has a smile on its face, is so happy. Right? You're happy, you're also successful, because ideas come to you, thoughts come to you, you become creative, you become innovative, you think of all different ways of coming up with something fantastic. You know, I had a wonderful opportunity of meeting the chairperson of Sanyo, worldwide, from Japan. She had come here, a lady that too. And she was speaking of how she has initiated the company strategy to work for the environment. And they've thought of a project called Gaio. Gaio is the Greek goddess of the earth. And the moment they shifted their focus from profit to environment, they came up in one product. They came up with the most innovative technology, which is they came up with a battery. You know, we use batteries and throw them. So they're not biodegradable. They ruin the environment. So they came up with a battery that lasts 1,000 times longer than an ordinary battery. And that battery, which lasts 1,000 times longer, is rechargeable. And even that rechargeable battery uses 1/20th of the electricity that a normal rechargeable battery uses. And it's all available in a nice, neat, compact package. It's beautiful. Now the point is that creativity came up only when they started focusing on the environment. As long as they were focusing on profits, nobody ever thought of it. And the highest form of giving, you reach the highest level of giving when you understand and you become aware of the millions of things that some divine force that you don't know has blessed you, gifted you with every little thing just perfect to make your life comfortable, happy, progressive. And when you become aware of that, then everything you do is for God. You could cook a meal as if you were cooking it for God. You could conduct business or manufacture a product as if you were going to offer it to God. And then how will it come? Everything will be perfect. And what happiness you gain from that is incredible. See, the moment you put in a selfish tag to it, the moment there are expectations, the moment you have a fruit in mind for yourself, as the Gita said, Krupana phala hetavaha. Wretched is the person who is looking for a fruit for himself. And yet all of us are driven crazy, driven mad, driven to death by selfish attitude. How can you be happy? See, the only thing, I don't know whether you're able to follow, what we're trying to say is, all of us are looking for happiness, we're chasing happiness, we want happiness, but we're doing everything to make ourselves miserable. So you are the architect of your own misery. And since you are causing all this to yourself, you can unravel it, go back in reverse gear and give yourself happiness. Next, emotion. Your emotions, all of us are entertaining all kinds of emotions. But this emotion is invariably, unfortunately, exclusive. Exclusive love. My love is limited only to me, my spouse, my child. And sometimes spouse is also excluded. So such a narrow spectrum of love. Outside of this narrow circle, you don't even see anyone. How can you love? And this separateness is the cause of all our misery. The first verse of the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita starts with Dhritarashtra saying, Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kimakurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra asks Sanjaya, he says, what are my sons and the sons of Pandu doing? This itself sets the base for all conflict. The entire Mahabharata took place because of Dhritarashtra, and he was blind, born blind. Not physically, mentally blind. Physical blindness is not so bad. It's the mental blindness that's most difficult to overcome, which all of us are. So this mental blindness is something that causes this separateness. He was unable to see, and especially in those days, you see, the Pandavas were the sons of his own brother who had died. The brother had died. So he was actually the father to both the Pandavas and the Kauravas. But the problem is he saw a difference. And it is this difference that killed them all. Not only did he destroy himself with this difference, he killed every one of his sons. But he never realized it till the end. It's only we who are discussing it thousands of years later who are recognizing it. But then we see it in the case of Dhritarashtra, we don't see it in our own lives. We don't see where we are destroying ourselves with this sense of separateness. If only you were able to see this oneness. How does it all begin? It begins with consideration. It begins with putting yourself in the other person's shoes. So even when a person is doing wrong to you, even when a person is not living up to what you consider as an ethical standard, is doing something selfish, you're able to look at it with gentleness. That's why Mardavam is a very essential quality of the divine. And then it doesn't matter what happens to the other person. Your agitation ceases. You're able to carry on life normally, blissfully, happily. But if you sit there passing judgment on everyone and say, how can he do this? It's so selfish. The other person has no manners whatsoever. So on and so forth. You can find fault with the whole world all your life and you'll die doing that. But if you're able to see that oneness, it's a fantastic view of life. And the highest is you see everything as God's manifestation. Whatever you see God's roop there. Whatever you hear as God's gunas. Whatever you touch, wherever you go, you see the whole world as nothing but the Bhagavan's Leela, manifestation, play. And then you can't find fault with anything in the world. Even the worst of things happen. This is called Sharanagati. It's a wonderful quality to have. If you want to understand what this is, you should see a child and a mother on the streets. I'm sure you've seen this. The mother in her frustration, she whacks the child. It's really hurtful to the child. The child starts howling and walks 10 feet away and promptly comes back to the mother. Again it gets another whack. And you're sitting there in a car at the signal and you're trying to tell you're dying to tell the child. You say, why don't you go away from that stupid mother of yours? Because every time you go back to her, she gives you one more tight slap. But never does the child go away from the mother. However cruel the child is, whatever treatment the mother metes out to the child only finds satisfaction in the lap of the mother. This is called that surrender, Sharanagati, which whatever it is that comes from God, you're able to accept as prasad from the Lord. If you don't have this quality, believe me, it is extremely difficult to go through life's challenges because you don't understand what's happening. However intellectual you are, however much knowledge you may have, it's extremely difficult to stomach certain experiences unless you have this attitude of surrender. And this is what is called inclusive love. Once you love the Lord God, then you cannot hate any of God's manifestations. Thought, next. All our thoughts are there's research being done in every field of knowledge today. We are in the age of scientific inquiry.